When does a game need a remake? Dead Rising Deluxe Remaster is the latest in a deluge of recent revisits, reimaginings, and re-releases. It arrives at a time when we're rightly questioning whether these games honour the intent of their originals, if the diminishing returns of new console generations, both in terms of graphical fidelity and gameplay mechanics, give older titles longer shelf lives, reducing the need for remakes, and whether the time and resources spent on these revivals could have been better spent making brand new games. While I do have opinions on that wider conversation, and that context has influenced my feelings about Dead Rising Deluxe Remaster, this video is about this specific game rather than the broader debate. I'll be answering 3 questions. Does the core game hold up 18 years after its original release? What's changed in this Deluxe Remaster? And did we need this particular remake? There's also going to be a spoiler section at the very end for some things that I can't discuss without ruining some surprises for first-time players. As always, everything is timestamped, so feel free to jump around. Thanks to my patrons for making this video possible. They are Crow, Tiny Jericho, Mr. Terry Chaos, Ducky Go, Francis T218, and Deliberator. While this Deluxe Remaster has a lot of changes, which we'll explore in detail in the next section of the video, it still offers largely the same experience as the original game. How does it fare 18 years on, when game design best practice has presumably shifted and evolved since? Fortunately, Dead Rising always did things its own way rather than conforming to the tropes and staples of its era. There truly aren't many games like it, allowing its unique formula to still feel fresh all of these years later. The game's an odd amalgamation of lots of influences. We have an in-game clock a la Shenmue, limited inventory slots similar to Resident Evil, we can get our Pokemon Snap-on with our camera, level up with mechanics you would find in most RPGs, and explore a small but densely detailed sandbox full of surprises. We play as freelance photojournalist Frank West, who has gotten a hot tip that something's going down in the small town of Willamette, Colorado. He finds himself airdropped into the middle of a zombie outbreak, and has 3 days before his helicopter picks him up to not only survive, but also uncover the cause so he can break the story. From there, we're left to our own devices. There's a main story quest we can choose to follow or ignore. There are optional side quests that see us saving survivors or fighting off various psychopaths, not all of which we're actually told about. We can also just run around the mall, dicking about and treating it as a miniature sandbox. All of this is tied to an in-game clock that's constantly running. 5 minutes of real time equals 1 hour in-game, so each day is 2 hours of gameplay. Events become available and disappear at set times. If we're not there, we'll miss them and lose opportunities to save people or advance the plot. This isn't like Shenmue, where the clock merely dictates when shops will open and close, NPCs' routines, and how late Ryo can stay out before going home to bed, with an overall relaxed time limit of 1 year to solve the mystery. This is a much more stressful clock that owns us. Managing to do everything in a perfect run is something we need to think about and plan ahead of time. Unfortunately, this means that Dead Rising has always had a pacing issue. There are either a borderline overwhelming number of things happening, with barely enough time to do it all, or absolutely nothing is happening. A great example would be Day 2, where efficient players will have wrapped everything up, including optional content, by 8 PM, with the next event not being until midnight. That's 4 in-game hours, or 20 real-time minutes, where we're left to our own devices. Likewise, a final day where, even on a Saint and overtime run, nothing happens between midnight and 10 AM, resulting in us needing to kill 10 in-game hours or 50 minutes real time. Now, we can use this time to get fresh weapons and healing items, level up by hunting down PP stickers or slaughtering zombies, or take care of unlisted errands such as getting the maintenance tunnel key. But it ultimately feels like wasted time, and many players just go AFK during these sections. The remake does have a solution for this, borrowing from Shenmue 2 and allowing us to fast forward time, but if anything, it just highlights the issue. The way events are spread out was likely intended to provide peaks and valleys, calms before storms, but instead feels like the game just runs out of steam, ideas, and content towards the end. Regardless of how we choose to play and how much we interact with those strictly timed events, Dead Rising offers a sense of progress. The most obvious is the level up system. We start at level 1 and, as we play, we gain more health, more inventory slots, and new hand-to-hand combat abilities. More importantly, we start to learn the layout of the mall, when and where survivors and psychopaths will appear, and the spawn points for the best weapons and health pickups. We discover books that make our weapons more durable, health recovery items more effective, and our attacks stronger. We start to form little routines, habits, and plans. That's arguably the biggest difference between a new player and a long-time fan, and why the latter has a much higher chance of success. We also get showered in unlocks for completing certain trophies. These are new weapons, new costumes, and, in the remake, new books that make our future runs a little bit easier. Dead Rising handles game overs in quite a unique way. When we die, we have a couple of choices: load a recent save, quit to the title screen, or restart the story while keeping our current level and stats. That last one is interesting. We get to come back more powerful than before, sure, but we also come back with that increased knowledge mentioned earlier. In that regard, Dead Rising arguably sits within the time loop genre. We're not expected to complete a perfect run from a fresh save file. We will probably have to loop a couple of times before we can get the best ending, with all psychopaths defeated and survivors rescued. There's even common advice online to burn a loop, killing zombies in the maintenance tunnels, just to get our level up. Sadly, some of the changes in this remake dilute that element, making it more than possible to get a Saint and Overtime run on our first attempt. Something that only very experienced players could achieve in the original, but we'll discuss that when we review the changes. Having recently finished Summertime rendering, I'm a tad disappointed that the game's narrative doesn't recognise or play with Frank's ability to time loop. Imagine if Frank was aware of it in-universe, finishing people's sentences for them, stopping Lindsay from trying to rescue Madonna, in turn preventing the zombies from flooding the entrance plaza, or punching out and restraining the big bad the moment he touches down from the helicopter. Yes, that would massively expand the scope of the game, probably isn't practical, and would result in messy branching paths so likely isn't even remotely feasible, but the game already has multiple endings, and it's a fun thought I wanted to share. The photography system plays a smaller role than we might think. We can snap a photo at any time and earn experience points from it, but we can only take a limited number of photos before our batteries run out, which prevents us from abusing it, although there are several shops around the mall where we can get new batteries. There are only a handful of missions, or scoops as the game calls them, that require us to take a photo. None of these are mainline story quests, so we can, theoretically, complete the game without ever taking a single snap. That somewhat undermines the entire system, and it's not surprising that the feature didn't return for Dead Rising's 2, or at least 2's original release, and 3. While the zombies themselves don't pose much of a threat, there are a number of human enemies in the game who have much higher mobility, more complex patterns, and access to projectile attacks. These encounters force us to accept that combat is a little clunky. Every weapon has preset attack animations that our foes can interrupt, with some enemies being able to stun lock us. New players might feel like they're doing it wrong. Rest assured, it's just how the game is. Watching a brawl in Dead Rising, even from players who know what they're doing, will always make it look like Frank is bumbling his way through, and I can't help but think that might be by design. It would definitely be in character. Dead Rising doesn't make a good first impression. It's a bit awkward, a tad obtuse, and it adds friction that just doesn't exist in most polished modern games. A lot of people, understandably, give up early, but those who stick with it often find it becoming one of their favourite games ever made. It probably goes without saying, but I'm in the latter camp of people who adore this quirky, bizarre, and unique title. That puts this remake in a somewhat difficult position. Does it smooth off the rough edges to appeal to a wider audience, at the risk of ruining the secret sauce and changing the game's identity? Or does it remain faithful, hoping the hardcore fanbase is big enough for the game to be profitable? The end result falls somewhere in the middle. It has a number of changes, some well received, others, not so much. Let's start with the gameplay changes. This is a new engine and presumably new code, so Frank feels different to handle, emphasised by new controls. We can now move while aiming, and the previously unlockable dodge roll is now easier to perform, mapped to the East Face button, and is available from the start. The classic controls are still available for those who prefer that layout though. Frank also levels up more quickly at the start of the game. Playing side by side with the original, I was consistently at a higher level in the remake. At first. By the end of my Saint and Overtime playthrough, I was level 48, which feels about right. It seems like the level up curve has been changed, bringing us more progress earlier on, before spacing level ups further apart later. This certainly makes playthroughs starting from level 1 more feasible. We can now answer Otis's calls hands-free. In the original game, we couldn't do anything while listening to a call, and getting attacked by a zombie would interrupt and restart the call. Now we can act freely while receiving calls, which is a greatly appreciated quality of life upgrade. We can speed up time at save points, which greatly helps the pacing during repeat playthroughs or during those periods I mentioned earlier where nothing's happening. It feels like a bandage over a larger problem though, with the game's final day still ending with a whimper rather than a bang. Survivor AI has thankfully been improved. This was one of the biggest complaints about the original game, with leading larger groups back to safety being nigh on impossible. The other side of the coin is that this also applies to the psychopaths, with the convicts in particular no longer crashing into trees and being harder to kill. Some bosses now spawn further away, move faster, or are generally more aggressive. I found many of them were more likely to use an escape move to get me off them, so I couldn't just spam katanas and chainsaws. All of the Carlito fights in particular felt more involved. Weapons have been rebalanced. In the original, we could grab the small chainsaws, find free books that boost that weapon, and carve through pretty much everything without much thought. That's no longer the case, and bosses have damage caps that prevent us from finishing them off in mere seconds. In the original game, we could only save in specific places, usually being toilets and beds. Dying meant either starting a new game, retaining our character level, or reloading a save that we made half an hour or longer ago. The remake sets frequent checkpoints and allows us to respawn at those checkpoints when we die, meaning we're only ever losing a few minutes of progress. This next one is debatably more of a graphical or UI change, but it has a gameplay impact. Weapon durability is now shown as a small bar. Previously, weapon icons would start fading in and out once they were on low durability, but we had to guess how long they would last overall. This new approach gives us far more information, removing tension and making weapon durability less engaging and impactful. There are hundreds of small changes, such as the number of photos we can take being increased from 30 to 100, how zombies with handguns will now fire them seemingly at random, or how previously beta version only weapons like the rocket launcher now appear in-game. They have a cumulative impact. While the game still feels like Dead Rising overall, I found myself taking more risks and being able to better optimize my run. For example, I could fight Cletus and get my hands on some guns before facing Adam the Clown. I took Tonya and Ross with me to the cliff battle instead of running them back to the security room first, a roll of the dice that would only invite disaster in the game's original form. At the same time, I appreciated being able to skip through the game's semi-frequent downtime. It's now much easier to revisit the game, and I think these changes would make it more suitable for streaming, as there now won't be long stretches where the player and their audience are just wasting time until the next event. I also think new players are more likely to stick with this friendlier and more approachable version of the game, giving them time to fall in love with it. We have a new voice cast, who re-recorded all of the lines. The fandom is unhappy that TJ Rotolo didn't reprise his role as our main character Frank West. This wasn't surprising, given that TJ didn't return to voice Frank in 2016's Dead Rising 4 either, but it's still disappointing. The rumour mill thinks it's because TJ is a unionised actor, and Capcom doesn't use union actors. If true, that's bad form from Capcom. Weirdly, Ty Olsson, who voiced Frank in Dead Rising 4 and was credited as Victor Noslow, doesn't return either. Instead, we have a new actor, Jazz Patrick. For my money, Jazz does a good job of portraying Frank. The performance feels in character and respectful to TJ's legacy. I quickly warmed and got used to this new performance. Not every line is a winner, there are some strange deliveries here and there, but the vibe of that original outing is well preserved. A new recording with a new cast also allowed the team to add voice acting where there was none before, such as in Otis's calls or when meeting survivors. It made some things I had glossed over in text form stand out to me, such as David foreshadowing Steven.
I went to go get some food from the market, but this crazy guy tried to kill me!
It also reminded me just how dark Dead Rising could get. This next exchange was gruesome enough to read, but hearing it voiced is something else.
They hate her! Those damn zombies hate my baby! Right in front of me! Oh god! I never heard her cry like that.
We also have some minor line changes too. In the original, a survivor named Ross says, "Let me borrow a gun, I want a chance at revenge." But if you give him one, he shoots himself. He now says, "Let me borrow a gun, I want to finish this myself," making his intentions much clearer and the results fairer. People have been unhappy with Cliff's lines being changed, claiming censorship. He used to say,
"It's because you're Viet Cong. I'm right, aren't I? You are nothing but a filthy communist!"
But he now says,
It's because you're a mole. I'm right, aren't I? You are nothing but a filthy animal!
This one I'm a little torn on. On the one hand, yes, a Vietnam veteran would use those terms, it is in character. It's odd for Cliff to say mole and animal instead, considering he still talks about the war after we defeat him. On the other hand, speculation online is that this change was required for an international release. If this tweak means that more people can purchase and enjoy the game, fine. The new lines are a very small price to pay for that. There's also claims that gameplay mechanics have been censored. The original game gave us bonus points for certain genres of photo. The erotica category has been removed in this new version, causing upset among some fans. This has minimal changes to the game itself. Kent's request is now for an outtake photo rather than an erotica one. I grabbed the Japanese tourist bowing, which I would be taking on my normal route for the easy experience points anyway. If anything, it makes that scoop easier and more convenient as part of a natural Saint run. This does also change Cheryl's late game request, making each of her poses a PP opportunity rather than an arrow photo. Gameplay-wise, that means we only get the extra experience for the first shot of each pose, but by the time we reach this point in the game, we'll be nearing level 50 and taking a victory lap anyway. We can still absolutely be a creep and take photos of Jesse's chest, the game just isn't going to encourage or reward us for being a pervert. Those complaining have picked a very weird hill to out themselves and die on. Next, we have Larry's redesign, which just means he's not a racist caricature anymore. The original design was questionable at best 18 years ago, and I'm amazed it was intact in 2016's remaster. It makes sense that they've changed this, especially considering the international markets mentioned earlier. In fact, everyone has had a bit of a redesign. Frank looks older, uglier, and more like his beta design. This also seems to lean into his appearance in Off the Record and Case West, although that simultaneously distances him from how he looks in Dead Rising 4. Seriously, man must have had some work done in between games. Sadly, the new look does lessen the idea that this is a relatively young, cocksure everyman who's in over his head. Brad also got aged way up. I find it harder to believe that he's still a field agent on active duty. This old man should be rocking a desk by now, not getting into gunfights with biological terrorists in a zombie-infested shopping mall. Then again, maybe that's why Frank has to pull most of the weight? Jessie has always had an excuse in her sprained ankle, but Brad had me questioning what he was doing and contributing in the original release. While Brad does help with certain missions, and there is a period where he's injured too, he had me asking, dude, why is a photojournalist doing your job for you? The UI has been completely redone, losing any sense of being an on-the-scene report from a news channel. You know, the entire thing that made it tie into Frank's profession. The new UI menus are fine, they look nice, they're functional, but it loses the tongue-in-cheek cheese of what came before. Fortunately, the soundtrack, including all licensed songs, does return. Gone Guru, Justified, and all of the mall music is intact. I love that the soundtrack feels like it's playing through the mall's speakers, making it diegetic. Even Gone Guru only plays when the convicts are active, implying it's playing from their Jeep's stereo. The vibe of Dead Rising would be entirely different without this OST. These tunes are a core part of the title's identity. Sadly, I did encounter a couple of glitches. These mostly saw zombies clipping into geometry and then getting stuck, as well as zombies gliding along with me when escorting survivors by offering them a shoulder. Thankfully, these instances were few and far between, and their impact was minor, resulting in a quick giggle. Outside of that, the remake ran pretty much flawlessly, even if OBS has dropped some frames in my capture for some reason. There are some other changes and general things I wanted to discuss that I can't do without spoiling the game for newcomers. I'll pop a timestamp on screen for you to skip ahead to the conclusion on whether I recommend this remake. Otherwise, welcome to Spoiler Town, population 53,594. Let's start with a small one that really impressed me. In the original game, we fought and killed 3 snipers. One of them, Thomas, was clearly hesitant in their introductory cutscene. In the remake, Thomas will not shoot us unless we shoot him first. In fact, if we take out his dad and his brother, Thomas surrenders. We can't save him, he's not an additional survivor sadly, but this was a really nice touch. We have new unlockables, such as a book that gives weapons infinite ammo and durability, and another which allows us to put weapons in blenders, somewhat bringing Dead Rising 2's combo weapons to this first adventure. Infinite mode has been completely overhauled. Where previously set survivors appeared at set times and set locations, it's now entirely randomized. The same people can even reappear. I had Carlito in the food court twice. Zombies, cult members, and special forces can all now drop food when killed. We don't have to rely on fighting survivors. And the biggest change is that advancing time carries across from the main game. We can pause, and there's even a suspend option that acts similarly to saving. We don't have to play for 14 straight hours anymore. We can get the 7-day survivor trophy in around 3 real-world hours. That's a huge relief. Now into plot spoilers. Remember how Dead Rising 3's Nick Ramos and Diego Martinez are revealed to have been 2 of Carlito's orphans? Specifically numbers 12 and 49? Yeah, the list of orphans on his laptop here still shows Orphan 12 as Lisa Jackson and 49 as Johan Collins. It would have been awesome if they had gone back and updated that list to improve continuity. Speaking of Carlito, this playthrough really reminded me that he was kind of wasted as a villain. Despite him being the one to call us to the mall in the first place, him being responsible for the outbreak, and fighting him 3 times, we're not the ones who kill him. Instead, Larry the Butcher just so happens to come across him and does him in without realizing the importance of those actions. The game loses all momentum after the Butcher. We now have this period where Carlito's Grand Orphan plan is being unveiled, but there can't be a final showdown with him. The villain that's been built up throughout the entire runtime, who had somewhat sympathetic motivations and appeared to be conflicted over his sister switching sides, is just gone. We're denied closure and satisfaction. Instead, we're hastily introduced to Brock, a one-dimensional meathead army man who follows orders without concern for morality, and who has nothing interesting to say bar verbally telling us he has a connection to the Santa Cabeza incident. We then fight him hand to hand atop a tank surrounded by zombies while feeling absolutely nothing. I've said it a few times during this video, but the game really does run out of steam and content long before the actual credits, and that's a shame. This remake could have been an opportunity to spread cases and scoops more evenly to improve the pacing, but they chose not to. It still just fizzles out with an underwhelming final act. Given the changes, is this now the best version of the game? Did we even need this remake? And which release, if any, should we play? Despite the game being officially titled Deluxe Remaster, I've been consistently calling it a remake for a couple of reasons. The first is that the newly released Deluxe Remaster has brand new graphical assets throughout, re-recorded voice acting with a new cast, multiple quality of life upgrades and gameplay tweaks, a new control scheme, rebalanced weapons and enemies, and, oh yeah, has been rebuilt from the ground up in a different engine, specifically the RE engine. Unlike Resident Evils 2, 3, and to a lesser extent 4, this is not a reimagining. This is largely the same gameplay style, with the same level designs, layouts, and enemies, with only minor edits to the original script. Dead Rising's revisit is incredibly faithful, feeling similar to the Crash Bandicoot N. Sane trilogy and Spyro Reignited trilogy. The other reason is the one that makes it difficult to recommend this new remake. Dead Rising already had a remaster which came to PlayStation 4, Xbox One, and PC in 2016 for the series' 10th anniversary. It was essentially the 2006 Xbox 360 exclusive transferred from its original 720p 30fps to a new 1080p 60fps available on all of the at-the-time current platforms. It felt much more responsive, it looked better, and it meant the game was no longer shackled to deprecated hardware. The 2016 remaster is essentially the exact same game at a higher fidelity, replacing that original 2006 release, and is the version I've been comparing the remake to. Props to Capcom. While everyone else is delisting older versions of games they've since re-released, we can still buy that 2016 remaster on every platform that the new remake is on. Capcom even permanently reduced the price from $15.99 GBP to $8.99. At the same time, that act of preservation makes us question whether Dead Rising needed this remake. The game was already available. It's also hard to tell someone to spend $39.99 on this version when more or less the same experience is available on the same machines for less than a quarter of that price. Commercially, this is exactly why other companies delist older versions of their games. Right now, we can get a triple pack that includes Dead Rising 1, 2, and Off the Record for $32.99, £7 less than the Deluxe Remaster. Selfishly, I love this franchise. I think they did a great job with Dead Rising Deluxe Remaster, and I want this to sell well so that Capcom is incentivized to give us more Dead Rising games in the future. I do believe there are some specific cases where buying the Deluxe Remaster is a no-brainer. People who dipped their toe into the original release but found it unwelcoming should give the series another try in this more approachable new form. Those who started with Dead Rising 2 and tried to go back to 1, but missed the quality of life upgrades and overall feel of the sequel, now have a version of the first outing that is more closely aligned to 2's gameplay. Die-hard fans like me have a lot to love. The game is faithful, it has brand new things for us to enjoy and discover, and the slightly easier difficulty means we can experiment with new routes, tactics, and approaches that would have either been too risky before, or are only made possible through the new additions. For people who have never played Dead Rising before, who want a low-risk, low-cost way to see if this series is for them, I think Dead Rising 2 is still the better entry point. It retails for $15.99 GBP, it often drops as low as $3.99, it's available on all modern platforms, it does a better job of onboarding and welcoming new players than the original game, and it features a unique main character in a story that can be experienced standalone without prior knowledge. Whichever of those entry points you choose, you're in for a great time with a unique and sorely overlooked duology, and I hope this is the start of a comeback for the series.